Greetings all, I'm Aaron Mills, and welcome back to Legacy of the Pink Panther, a 12-part retrospective on the films and cartoons of the Pink Panther franchise. Last time, we reached the end of the original Blake Edwards series of films with Son of the Pink Panther, a movie which justifiably put the final nail in the coffin of both the original series of films and Blake Edwards' career. However, that didn't necessarily mean that MGM was ready to throw in the towel on the entire franchise just yet. Following the failure of Son of the Pink Panther at the box office in 1993, Blake Edwards retired from filmmaking and remained so until his death in 2010. MGM, in the meantime, had a franchise that still had substantial name recognition but had been firmly established as being dead in the water. Faced with a property that had clearly run dry in terms of sequels, the studio decided the best way to move forward was to start fresh. In 1996, MGM began making overtures to popular comic actors of the time, most notably Robin Williams and Jim Carrey, to see if any of them would be interested in playing Inspector Clouseau in a new series of films. Further progress was made in 1997 when MGM cut a deal with Edwards to allow a new Pink Panther film to be made without his involvement. However, the project languished in development hell for several years with constant rewrites, recastings, and all the usual studio nonsense that happens in modern filmmaking. Ultimately, a new script by Michael Saltzman and Len Bloom came into possession of producer Robert Simons. Simons had a string of recent comedic hits which notably, or infamously if you like, included a majority of Adam Sandler's most successful films. However, it's his remake of the 50s comedy Cheaper by the Dozen starring Steve Martin which would lead to the Pink Panther being made again. Details are somewhat sketchy, and I may be incorrect in what actually happened, but it seems Simons decided to bring Martin in along with Cheaper by the Dozen director Shawn Levy to make the new film. Of course, the question on everyone's mind was, could rebooting the entire franchise from scratch breathe new life into it and finally give us a successful Pink Panther film without Peter Sellers in a lead role? Well, let's find out as we look at the 2006 remake of The Pink Panther. The film opens with some narration by Chief Inspector Dreyfus, this time played by Kevin Kline, who is talking to an unseen audience about Clouseau.
The first time I ever heard that name, Clouseau was just a little, nobody, a police officer in some little village far outside of Paris. He was the village idiot.
I mentioned how relieved I am that we as a collective audience finally got tired of the mockumentary format. We then see several examples of what sort of police officer this version of Clouseau is.
Your battery cable is coming down. Let's see, the positive to the negative to the positive. There. All clear. Keep it moving.
And while it's fairly obvious that there's no chance in hell that Clouseau is ever going to move beyond small-town cop, it would seem that fate and Dreyfus are about to smile on him. Not so much on soccer coach Yves Glouant, played in a lineless cameo by Jason Statham.
It was a perfect day for a murder. France against China, with the winner advancing to the finals. The coach of the French team, Yves Glouant, came out for his customary ovation. He raised his fist to the crowd. On it, the Pink Panther diamond. It was quite the symbol of pride and victory for the French team. Glouant's girlfriend at that time was Zania, the international pop star. They had been having quite a stormy affair.
When the game goes into sudden death, the French team pulls off a Hail Mary play and wins the game. The team and the media rush Glouant, and in the middle of the celebration, Glouant suddenly drops dead, murdered in front of an entire stadium full of witnesses, none of whom saw what happened. And to make matters worse, the Pink Panther, naturally, has been stolen. Which of course leads us into the obligatory animated opening credits. An interesting note here, the obligatory animated opening titles almost didn't happen. As became evident during production, this movie was going to be a brand new, fresh start for the series with little to no reference to whatever came before it. However, director Shawn Levy, who was all for this movie standing on its own merits without comparison to the Sellers films, put his foot down and said there were certain things that audiences were going to expect from a Pink Panther movie. And the animated opening titles were one of them. So removing those would probably be a bad idea. In fact, there were 2 animated opening title sequences created for this movie, but we'll talk about both of those in another episode. Returning to the film, Dreyfuss plots to distract the media who are covering the case by assigning it to Clouseau, the idea being that while Clouseau gets nowhere on the case and the media are watching him, Dreyfuss will investigate and eventually swoop in with the arrest and recover the diamond, taking all the credit and hopefully finally receiving the Medal of Honor after 7 nominations. And so, Clouseau arrives in Paris and meets Dreyfuss' secretary, Nicole.
Hey, over here.
Remember, family-friendly comedy. Clouseau finally meets Dreyfuss, and honestly, this is where you start to get concerned about the tone of this movie.
It is lovely weather we are having. I hope the weather continues. The area is secure.
I hope you like that joke, because they're going to repeat it 4 more times. Clouseau is promoted, causes Dreyfuss' fountain pen to leak, rips down his curtains, and gives his first press conference.
Killer, I will find you, because I am a servant of the nation, because justice is justice, and because France is France.
Here's one of my problems with Steve Martin in this role. While he's an excellent choice for Clouseau and is actually very well cast, the one thing he can't really do is Clouseau's mangled accent. See, it's not enough for your Clouseau voice to be a deliberately exaggerated bad French accent. What you need are the mispronunciations, the spoonerisms, and the occasional blink and you'll miss it rewordings. And as a result, especially in this scene, Martin's Clouseau doesn't sound like Jacques Clouseau as much as he does Elmer Fudd's French cousin. The next day, Clouseau is shown his new office and...
It is lovely weather we are having.
Yeah, they're doing that gag again. Less than 5 minutes after they did it the first time. Fortunately, they redeemed themselves somewhat by doing their own rather clever take on the globe gag from the original 1963 film.
You should probably start by looking at these files. And after...
Clouseau then meets his new partner, Gilbert Ponton, played by Jean Reno, who has been assigned to work with Clouseau in order to report back on Clouseau's progress to Dreyfuss. And this is where we also see some of the other problems with this version of Clouseau.
And what qualifications do you have for police work?
My family has done police work in Paris for 9 generations.
And before that?
We were policemen in the surrounding areas for 200 years.
And before that?
Immigrants from various countries in Europe, all involved in police work.
And before that?
Farmers.
So you are a little lamb who has come to Clouseau for to learn.
Here's the thing. You remember how I mentioned that Peter Sellers' Clouseau was convinced of his own genius but was also painfully aware of how much of his success was due to sheer dumb luck? Martin's Clouseau doesn't really have that self-awareness. His ego runs rampant throughout the film, and as a result, he's really kind of a jerk. Meanwhile, Dreyfuss' team analyzes footage from the game, and since Gluon was killed with Chinese poison, and the ambassador from China and his entourage were in attendance at the game, and Gluon was in China 3 years previously, they come to the conclusion that the murderer may in fact be Chinese. Which brings me to something I need to talk about. Now, I mentioned that the production team was well aware that there were certain things audiences were going to expect from a Pink Panther film, and one of these was the obligatory ambush fight, which were often cited as the highlights of the films during the Sellers era. However, by 2006, that could be perceived as kind of ethnically insensitive, shall we say? Although there was consideration of having Kato in this movie to begin with. Rumor has it Jackie Chan was approached for the role. But eventually it seems that the production team realized that Clouseau already had a sidekick in Ponton, and as a result, Kato was kind of superfluous and possibly borderline racist. So, how do you work in the ambush gag without that character? Well, in this case, they did the best thing they possibly could. They reversed the gag.
Good one. Thank you.
So now, rather than Kato attacking Clouseau and the two of them beating the hell out of each other for 5 minutes or more, it's Clouseau who attacks Ponton at random, and Ponton responds usually by ending the thing in one punch. It's the same basic gag, but in this case it's much shorter, which means they can repeat it a few more times, but it's still just as funny as the original ambush fights. Anyway, Clouseau and Ponton go to question Zanya, played by Beyonce Knowles, about what happened in the arena when the murder happened. It turns out about 6 hours before the match, Zanya caught Gluant cheating on her, and basically she started wailing on him, screaming that she was going to kill him. But she's not the only suspect.
Can you think of anyone else who might have hated Gluant?
Bisou.
The football star.
I was dating Bisou when I met Gluant. He thought Gluant was a bad guy for stealing me away.
After instructing the producer not to leave town because, as established, Clouseau is a jerk, Zanya asks if she can leave the next week because she, quote, has something vague to do in New York, unquote. Clouseau, in a smitten stupor oddly reminiscent of a shot in the dark, agrees to let her go. Next, Clouseau and Ponton head for the stadium to question Bisou, but he is unavailable. Instead, they question Vainqueur, the now head coach of the team.
I am told that Bisou hated Gluant.
A lot of people hated Gluant.
Did you?
I spent 6 years under his thumb, being verbally abused every day. Yes, I was not a fan of Yves Gluant.
And now he is dead. And you have his job. Ironic.
Not every death is a tragedy.
After this, Clouseau hears someone approaching the training area and decides to try some Sherlock Holmes-style deduction. He is, of course, dead wrong.
Is anyone with you?
No?
Do you have a pair of high heels in that bag?
No?
Not even a small pair of pumps?
No?
Who are you?
I am Yuri, the trainer.
And what is it you do here, Yuri, the trainer?
I train.
Clouseau gets Bisou into the interrogation room and uses the good cop, bad cop routine. Of course, this is Clouseau, so yeah, you can imagine how this goes.
You disgust me. I'll be right back. Cigarette?
His partner in those stupid restaurants. La Roque.
Raymond La Roque. C'est un casino owner.
Gluant would steal money from the restaurants and use it to gamble.
Clouseau is convinced that Bisou didn't kill Gluant, and so he and Ponton call it a day. Meanwhile, Bisou is also about to call it a day. Permanently.
Oh, it's you.
Clouseau returns home and finds Nicole has brought some new suits for him. Ponton arrives to a misunderstanding as Clouseau gives Nicole the Heimlich maneuver, remember, family-friendly comedy, and he reports that Bisou is dead. They return to the arena where Clouseau encounters Yuri again.
I'll be honest with you, I find your accent quite funny. Where are you from?
From Russia. Gluant recruited me from the Russian military team.
You need to work on your accent.
Again, Clouseau is a jerk. Clouseau and Ponton decide to pick up their lead and head out to question La Roque. However, on his way in, he hears someone else using the same inane comments about the weather he's been using throughout the film and has an encounter with a British secret agent played by Clive Owen. This has absolutely nothing to do with the plot. While Clouseau has a moment that is also reminiscent of the Sellers movies, it's revealed that La Roque took out an insurance policy on Gluant. However, the terms are such that it will not be paid unless Gluant's murderer is caught, and if La Roque turns out to be the murderer, it won't be paid at all. But there's other issues at hand.
Gluant was siphoning money out faster than it came in. My only consolation was he'd lose the money gambling in my casino. But after a while, his losses became so ridiculous. He promised me his ring as collateral.
In the middle of the questioning, Clouseau gets a call from the spy who points out the casino is under attack by a gang called the Gas Mask Bandits. The spy borrows Clouseau's coat and apprehends the gang, leaving just before the press arrives and letting Clouseau take credit for the capture. The next day, the stupidity continues as Clouseau, acting on reports that Bisou's last words were, "Oh, it's you," has everyone with the last name Yu brought in for questioning.
You may go.
You speak Chinese?
What, you don't think I speak Chinese?
If I don't speak Chinese, what are we doing here? Of course I speak Chinese!
What follows after this is Dreyfus sneaking into Clouseau's office to look at his notes, then hiding behind a curtain when Clouseau shows up. Clouseau notices his feet under the curtain and beats Dreyfus senseless with a chair. Afterwards, Clouseau gives an update to Dreyfus on the case. Later, Dreyfus has a meeting for the announcement of the nominees for the Medal of Honor, where he gets an unpleasant surprise.
I would like to add one more name for the committee's consideration. Inspector Jacques Clouseau, the man who came here from a small village to investigate the murder of Yves Gluant, who just last night captured the notorious gas mask bandits.
Dreyfus calls Ponton on the carpet for not reporting that Clouseau is going to the casino. Later, Ponton and Clouseau review the facts of the case, and Clouseau states that he doesn't think Zanya is the killer, but that she does know more than she's telling. Ponton reports that Zanya has departed for New York, and Clouseau insists that they follow. This leads to one of the most famous bits in this film.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
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 The burger.
Yeah, this is funny. For now. In New York, after having his first hamburger, yes, this is relevant, Clouseau and Ponton follow Zanya after Ponton discovers Zanya made 2 phone calls to a black market diamond cutter. They follow her there, and she comes clean about why she's visiting.
This purse once belonged to Josephine Baker. It was falling apart, so I had it studded with diamonds to wear on stage at the presidential ball.
And why did you just not tell me why you were coming?
I can't be seen at a diamond cutter. Not after what happened.
Zanya invites Clouseau to dinner that night, where after things seem to be turning romantic, Clouseau loses a Viagra down the drain of the sink, resulting in this. You remember back in Return of the Pink Panther how I explained that Peter Sellers could do an extended slapstick sequence like this without the need for music under the scene? This is what I'm talking about. Most of the stuff that's happening here would be perfectly funny on its own, but the wacky music underneath it is undercutting Steve Martin's own talent for slapstick. It's too loud, it's too brash, and as a result, the scene is nowhere near as funny as it could be. Fortunately, it does end fairly strongly.
Hello. We need fresh towels and 204.
At the airport the next day, Clouseau returns to Paris, but unknown to him, Dreyfus has his bag replaced with a bag filled with assorted weaponry. This gets further complicated when a dog is called over and smells the hamburgers Clouseau has in his pockets and is trying for some inexplicable reason to smuggle past customs. Yeah, we all know where this is going.
Sir, I'm losing my patience.
Oh, you are? You are losing your patience? Yes. I'm sitting telling you I have a couple of hamburgers.
I've got an Andarter down on 6. I've got an Andarter down on 6!
What's the word, sir?
Clouseau, now a national disgrace, is hauled back to Paris, and Dreyfus finally lets him know what's really been going on.
I only made you inspector because I needed someone who would quietly get nowhere until I was ready to take over the case myself.
I was trying to catch a killer.
Clouseau also figures out that Ponton was in on the plan and goes home dejected. The next day, Dreyfus presents his team with his solution to the murder.
Meet Dr. Li Hao Pang. He was, of course, in the VIP box when Gluant was killed. Coincidentally, Dr. Pang would send Gluant large sums of money. Presumably, Gluant was to invest these sums on Pang's behalf. But being a compulsive gambler, Gluant took the money and gambled it all away. So, Pang had the motive. He had the opportunity. Pang is in France for the president's ball tonight. We will arrest him there for the murder of Yves Gluant.
Dreyfus holds a press conference to announce he's taking over the case, and a reporter provides an interesting fact about Bisou's death.
Inspector, the coroner has announced that Bisou was killed with a perfect shot to the occipital lobe. Any comments?
The occipital lobe? It's irrelevant.
Zoom.
This starts Clouseau down a path that will lead him to the identity of the murderer and the location of the Pink Panther. At the presidential palace, Dreyfus removes Clouseau from the guest list, preventing him from getting in. But fortunately, Nicole is there with the bag that Clouseau requested.
Inspector, here is your bag.
Good work, Nicole.
What is that?
Camouflage.
Yes, camouflage. Boy, howdy is it camouflage. Upstairs, Clouseau manages to spot the murderer and he and Panther give chase. However, they're delayed by security, but thanks to a timely rescue by Nicole, and resulting in this image, which is going to be burned in your brain for the rest of your life, they manage to prevent the killer from killing Zanya. As they give chase, Dreyfus moves in to arrest Dr. Pang, but Clouseau manages to catch the killer, who turns out to be...
You're the trainer who trains! Gluon was not! I drew up the place. He takes credit for brilliant French defense, which I gave him, and treats me like I'm dead. Okay, fine, no, he is dead.
As it turns out, that seemingly throwaway gag about Clouseau speaking Chinese was actually relevant. Clouseau does speak Chinese, and the woman, protesting how bringing her in was a waste of time, told him to look for soccer trainers who are apparently required to have knowledge of Chinese herbs. But that's not all.
Bisou had often heard Yuri's rants against Gluon, so Bisou blackmailed Yuri and got himself killed.
But Yuri is a soccer trainer. That shot was made by an expert marksman.
Chief Inspector, I'm sure you're familiar with Russian Army Statute 611.
Well, of course.
All members must be expert marksmen and understand the location of the occipital
lobe, of course.
In mystery lovers circles, we refer to this as pulling a solution out of your ass because you don't really want to bother with the plot of your own movie. But that still leaves the question of where the Pink Panther is.
It is there! In her purse!
Dreyfus doesn't find the diamond in Zanya's purse, but Clouseau reveals it's in the lining. Zanya reveals that Gluon asked her to marry him at the game, and gave her the Pink Panther as the engagement ring.
If Gluon gave you the ring before he died, then according to Civil Statute 812-914b, you are the rightful owner. You may keep the Pink Panther.
But I can hear you now. How the hell did Clouseau know that the ring was in Zanya's purse in the first place? Well...
I was looking at a photo of myself at the checkpoint. Something caught my eye. Zanya's purse passing through the X-ray machine. I enlarged the photo, and in it, the Pink Panther. The case is closed!
And so, Clouseau is redeemed and receives the Medal of Honor, much to Dreyfus' chagrin and pain.
Oh no.
Hit it, Panther!
What? Nothing. You didn't say, stop the car? Dear God, I beg of you, stop the car?
However, to the movie's credit, things do end in the traditional Pink Panther fashion.
Tonton?
Yes, Inspector.
This is a very hard time for Inspector Dreyfus. It is important that we show compassion. And we must use the gentle healing power of laughter. This is going to hurt.
And so, with that callback, we come to the end of The Pink Panther. Honestly, this is a movie that has not aged well. While I enjoyed it when it first came out, watching it again, I realize there's a lot of jokes that just don't land, being more eye-rolling than actually funny. As mentioned, Steve Martin's Clouseau is really kind of a jerk through the whole movie, only becoming tolerable once he's knocked off his high horse. Which is not to say Martin isn't trying, he's actually very good, but the slapstick is just too over the top, and it seems more like everything got thrown at the wall rather than trying for precision gags. The rest of the cast is fine, with Jean Reno and Kevin Kline as standouts. I mean, hell, Kline even manages to get the Dreyfus eye twitch into one scene. But pretty much, the movie clearly doesn't care about its own story, preferring to give time to gags and sequences that just aren't particularly funny, and repeating gags that are funny once, but really not again, even if some of them are setting up actual moments for payoff later. Contrast this to A Shot in the Dark, where the solution to the mystery also has little to do with anything, but in that movie's case, the gags are consistently funny enough to help you ignore that fact. Here, not so much. Overall, if you've never seen it before, it's worth a watch, but don't expect too much out of it. The Pink Panther took in $158.9 million at the box office against an $80 million budget, making it the hit that MGM was hoping for, and so they rushed a sequel into production. Unfortunately, it would seem that everyone involved missed entirely what made this version a hit to begin with. But we'll talk about that next time when we look at the least imaginatively titled entry in this entire series, The Pink Panther 2. I'm Aaron Mills. Join me again next time as we continue our look at the legacy of the Pink Panther.